Hi, I'm Patrick Kilby with Rio Products. Welcome to another Tying the Fly. For this session, it's the copper top, a summer steelhead fly that has produced many fish for me over the years. It's a favorite of mine. I like that it just uses a few materials, so it's a great fly for anyone to get started tying summer steelhead patterns. Starting with a size 4 black finished steelhead hook. So there's this little bit of metal return that comes back around, and that's about the 1/4 mark. If we say this is half and this is 1/4, I like to start my thread right behind that, and I just work backwards over itself, and then I take one turn around and a couple more, and that does a couple things. It secures my thread to the shank, and it puts me now in about the 1/3 mark on this shank. And that's what we want, because this is going to be how the fly is proportioned out. 1/3 copper wire, or sorry, 2/3 copper wire, 1/3 black chenille. But we're going to start with the tail, and we're going to tie it in all the way back here. And the reason for that is so we can have a nice smooth base for the body. This is 6 strands of gold crystal flash. I'm going to double this around my thread. And by doubling it, I just mean folding it around my thread. And bringing it up on top of the shank, holding it snug so it stays on top of the shank as I wrap my thread back. And I'm going to wrap back to a point where my thread is directly or very closely touching the point of the hook. That's my alignment mark. I like it there. Another secure wrap there to hold it in place. And then to get the dimensions of the tail, I'm going to just fold this back up at this point, slide them all up, and just slide my scissors in here behind the eye of the hook, and I'm going to trim those off square. And that's how long I want this tail to be. From there, we are going to attach our copper wire. And to do that, I am going to measure the wire to come back to where we wanted that 1/3, 2/3 split to be. And I'm doing that again so that I have a nice smooth base for this copper wire to come forward on. So I'm going to take very nice secure wraps all the way forward, trying to keep that wire secured up on top. Always be careful when you come to the end of a wire, because if your thread hits it, it can be sharp and it can cut your thread pretty quickly. And it's not a bad idea to put a drop of super glue on at this point. As you bring your wire forward, it will just give it that added security. It'll prevent it from unraveling, and those are all good things. It's not necessary, but not a bad idea. So we are going to now wrap our wire forward. Nice tight wraps of our wire. And if you notice, I'm not letting the wire creep forward like this because it will spiral in open gaps. I'm actually keeping my wire angled back so that they are rubbing basically against the last one, and that helps keep it very tight and does not allow gaps to form as we come forward with our wire. We will just keep this going until we reach where our thread is waiting for us. If a gap does form, you can push on it with your thumbnail to help keep it tidy. If a gap does form, it's not the end of the world. It's just simply we're trying to tie clean flies and help with their durability. So it's not going to make it less effective as a fish catching fly. All right, so we are basically where we want to stop now. So to do that, I'm just going to lean this forward and capture this wire with my thread. There's lots of ways you can trim this off here. Some people do a move called helicoptering, so you can just rotate this till the wire breaks right there. I do that on some. I think it can risk breaking your thread sometimes, so I don't like to do it all that often. You can use an old pair of fingernail clippers and trim it off, but I just recycle my old scissors. I paint them red to know that this is for cutting wire, and I can just come in here, trim that off, and I will bend that tip down where I cut it because it's a nice little sharp edge, and wrap over it so that it's not gonna cut anything I don't want it to cut. All right, we're ready to attach our chenille. So with this black chenille, you can just strip off a little bit of it with your thumbnail and finger and leave some of the inside strands. If you attach it right there, then it's a nice small tie-in point. It's not the big bulky thing here. And now again, moving our thread forward to where we want it to wait for the next material. Now we can start wrapping. The first wrap is just barely over the end of our copper wire there. And we just take a couple of turns forward. It takes about 2 to 3 turns of this large chenille. And all this is really doing is creating a little bump for this hackle to wrap around, okay? So we've secured the chenille. Trim that off. I'm going to reposition my hook because I didn't get that in there too tight. I'm going to pull this back and just create enough room for my hackle. With this, I am going to come in here. There's all this kind of downy feather here at the bottom of it, and then the softer fibers up here that are not so downy soft, if you will. I'm going to strip off the stuff that I don't need. Trim this so I end up with just a little bit of stem to work with. I'm going to lay this at a slight angle on the near side of the hook. Take a few securing wraps. If you want, you can bend this back over and take a couple more, and now it's definitely not going to slide out of there. It would break before it slid out. Again, if you want to use hackle pliers, you can. It's not necessary on big feathers like this. I feel like I have more control without. So stroking these fibers back against the stem and bringing it around just in front of that chenille. These fibers should reach somewhere between the tip and the barb of the fly. They can go longer, they can be shorter, but again, just to kind of keep it in a known proportion that works. That's the distance. So that was what, 2 to 3 turns of material. With this feather to trim it, I like to hold it, put my scissors so that they are rubbing against the stem of the fly or the feather, and slide it down and trim it off. All right, so we've got our feather in place. Last is the wing, which is going to be the same material that we used on the tail. And we're going to tie it in similarly, but we're not going to wrap it around the thread this time. First thing we're going to do is even this up a bit, just to make use of the materials. We want to make sure that they reach at least halfway down the tail, okay? If they're too short, it's not going to work. If they're too long, that's fine because we can trim it. So if it's reaching at least halfway down, we know we're in the game. We're going to lay this on top. You notice I'm pinching it with these fingers to hold it in place on top. A couple of wraps where I increase tension as I go. So now that is secured, but now I want to bend this back up on top and take a couple more securing wraps at the base of that. What this is allowing is for me to keep a very nice tiny head on this fly, which is just a good classy look, and it helps it go through the water better. If it's too bulky, it wants to ride up in the water column as you swing it across. This is meant to be fished subsurface, floating line. You know, I like at least a 9-foot leader. I'll go as long as sometimes 13 foot if I'm using a spey rod, but you know, 9 to 10 feet is normal, and it's just meant to be subsurface. The takes on this, you will see a visual boil on the surface. You may never see the fish take it, but you'll see the boil that's left behind when they do eat it. So for the distance on this, I'm going to look for halfway down my tail, and that's my trim point. So I'm going to trim these off square and finish this with my whip finish. I like 5 turns. And then if it's not too bulky, I'll do another 5 just to really finish it up. Make it tight and trim off your excess thread. Then I like a little bit of some sort of a securing agent, whether it's head cement, Sally Hansen's, or I like this UV resin, and I like to apply it with a bodkin. So I will just dip a little bit in there and apply just on the threads. I'm careful not to build bulk. I'm careful not to trap the feather fibers or get it in the eye of the hook. And then we can hit it with our light. You can either rotate the fly or rotate your light. I like at least 20 seconds with a UV light. And there you go. That is a favorite summer steelhead fly of mine. It's easy to tie. It's easy for people to get started in steelhead fly tying, and it's a very productive pattern, the copper top. Thanks for joining me.